economic sanctions and their impacts. Rickards implies that there will be massive food shortages as Russia occupies Ukraine.
Well, the repercussions may be felt for 10 years or longer, but the immediate impact is going to go well beyond the so-called sanctions. What the point I was really making was we're slapping sanctions on Russia. Russia is hitting back with some retaliatory actions, and it's pretty easy to look at the direct impact of that, but there's second order and third order effects that will pop up all over the world and could very quickly get out of control. Think of it as the economic equivalent of a nuclear war. Nobody wants a nuclear war, but I studied a nuclear war fighting actually in the beginning of the late 1960s with Herman Kahn, Henry Kissinger, the Wallstetter, the leading scholars of the time. And they had different theoretical views. A lot of it was game theoretic. Fortunately, we didn't actually have a nuclear war. But the one thing they all said in common, the one thing they all shared was don't go there. And what they meant was that nobody wakes up and says, oh, gee, I think I'll start a nuclear war today. What a good idea. That never happens. What does happen is you get into an escalatory situation, back and forth, where you're escalating, and you end up in a nuclear war. You never intended it, never started out that way, but you end up there through escalation. Now take that, and that is good analysis, take that and apply it to what is now, I would say, the first full-scale economic war, sanctions war. We've had sanctions, for a long time. I mean, going back to at least the 70s with Iran, but even before that, I mean, FDR put sanctions on Japan in August 1941, and then 5 months later they bombed Pearl Harbor. So the not coincidence, but the coexistence or interaction of economic sanctions and kinetic warfare is nothing new. So we've had it before. Nothing on this scale. This is unprecedented in its scope and application. And my only point is the effects of this are going to not just last a long time, yes, but they're going to pop up in very, very unexpected places. Right. Well, let's start with the sanctions and then pivot over to how China can replace a lot of other points of contact in terms of the Russian economy. These sanctions will not work to stop the war or slow the war or change the outcome of the war. Now, they absolutely punish the Russian economy. Yep. They punish Russian individuals, consumers, Russian citizens. They're going to have fewer options, more expensive goods. Their economy is going to slow down. Unemployment will go up. The ruble is devalued. All those things are true, but they're also true in the United States. We're going to punish Americans far worse than the Russians. We're already seeing. I took a long trip yesterday. I filled up my car with gas at the end of the trip. It was $76. It used to be $45 to fill up my car. Now it's $76. Yeah. Not quite doubling. Well, multiply that by 200 million cars and every consumer in the United States and elsewhere in the world. You're seeing the impact of this already. It's not like, oh, gee, it's coming. It's already here. It's going to get a lot worse. And when I say a lot worse, I'm not just talking about prices, in the grocery store, which are going to go up a lot. They have gone up already. I mean, inflation's already here. Watch what's going to happen. Ukraine's kind of one of their nicknames is the breadbasket of Europe. They provide about, Russia and Ukraine together provide about 25% of the grain exports in the world. And, pick your country, but when you get to Africa, there are countries in Africa where they get almost 100% of their grain from Ukraine. Lebanon gets 100% of its grain from Ukraine. Those people are going to starve because the Russians have taken over the Sea of Azov. They're working on the Black Sea ports. Odessa's the big one that's left, but Odessa's in their sights. That'll be a month to 6 weeks away because they got to finish up Mariupol and connect the line from Kharkiv to Donetsk and then extend through Crimea. So they have a lot of work to do in the south and the east to consolidate that. But then they'll turn and Kiev's last. Everyone's like, oh, gee, Putin had a 3-day blitzkrieg in Kiev and he didn't do it, so he's failed. That's not true. Where did that come from? That's a Western propaganda narrative to set up Putin as a failure. That was never Putin's plan. Have you seen the Russian battle plans? I haven't, but I know what they're doing just by looking at their operations. Kiev is last on the list. They want to get Odessa first, but when they do, and this may already be the case because the Russian Navy is in the Black Sea, there are not going to be any exports from Ukraine. And the U.S. has banned most exports from Russia. And Russia has retaliated by saying, we're not going to export you anyway. Even if you didn't have a ban, you're on our banned list. So, but you take 25% of the world's grain exports off the market, Tell me what that does to the price of wheat. And by the way, wheat's not just a loaf of bread. Most grain is used to feed livestock. So it goes straight through the price of pork, chicken, beef, etc. You're looking at things doubling or more. And then that's if you can get it. Then behind that are shortages. Now, we had a supply chain breakdown before any of this started. The supply chain has been breaking down in stages over the last several years. That became acute last fall, and everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, give it a month, they'll sort things out. No, it's getting worse. And now you put the Ukraine war on top of that and the economic sanctions on top of that, it's going to get a lot worse. So, so those are some of the economic effects, and those are the easy ones. I'll give you an example of a more difficult one. So, we kicked Russia and their 10 biggest banks out of SWIFT. That's the, know what that is. That's the worldwide banking telecommunications facility. So you can't use SWIFT to move money around. Kicked them out of the dollar payment system. Did a long list of things. Can't trade Russian bonds, can't receive, can't send, etc. Well, the other day, the Central Bank of Russia paid dollar interest on their external dollar-denominated bonds. And everyone's like, wait a second, I thought we had sanctions. I thought we'd kicked them out of the system. Here, Russia's paying, now they have about $150 billion of external dollar-denominated debt. They had a big payment coming up, interest payment, and they paid it. Like, how did that work? Well, two things. Number one, you got to read. I've actually read all these sanctions. There's a couple hundred pages at this point, but in the fine print, a lot of these things have delayed effective dates. They were issued in late February, early March, but they had 30, 60, or 90-day delays in the effective date, depending on the sanction. So most of them aren't even in place yet. Number one. Number two, somebody at the Treasury finally woke up and said, well, wait a second. If we tell Russia they can't pay the debt, who loses from that? They keep the money, and our bondholders, it's American bondholders who lose money. It's the creditor who loses out when the debtor can't pay. Where are those bonds? Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of them are in BlackRock. They could be in someone's 401k. Like, I didn't buy any Russian bonds. Well, did you buy an emerging market ETF from Morgan Stanley? Because there could be some Russian bonds in there. I mean, take a look. But my point is, this is where, when I made the comment, what happens in Russia doesn't stay in Russia. When you tell the Russians that they can't pay their debt, and so debt starts defaulting all over the world, you don't know where it's going to pop.